The Grand Assembly Hall of the Crystal Council had stood for 11,000 years, its walls grown from living crystal that hummed with the accumulated wisdom of 400 member species. It had witnessed the induction of civilizations, the signing of treaties that ended wars spanning galaxies, and the quiet, dignified extinction proceedings of species who had failed to meet the Council's exacting standards. It had never witnessed what was about to happen. Kalen Voss stood in the center of the chamber, his hands cuffed behind his back with restraints designed to hold beings 12 times his mass. Dried blood crusted along his temple, dark and human red against pale skin. Beside him, Salara Chun knelt where the guards had forced her down, her jaw already swelling purple from where a Threll enforcer had struck her 20 minutes earlier for speaking out of turn. Counselor Vrenadaskal of the Threll Dominion looked down at them from the high dais with the particular satisfaction of a being who believed he was witnessing the end of an inconvenience. "Let the record show," Vren said, his 4 eyes gleaming, "that the human delegation has been found guilty of unauthorized technological development, violation of the Ascension protocols, and destabilization of Council trade agreements. Sentence: immediate dissolution of Earth's provisional membership, seizure of all human territories, and—" "You already had us kneeling," Kalen said quietly. "Why the speech?" Vren's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Silence, animal." "That's the thing," Salara said, spitting blood onto the crystal floor, a floor that had never once in 11,000 years been stained by violence within these walls, because violence within the assembly was itself a council law, older than every member species present. "You just broke your own rule. A minor infraction, given the circumstances." "No," Kalen said. "You don't understand. You really don't." He wasn't afraid. That was the part that unsettled the watching counselors. The 31 species arrayed around the chamber, some with wings folded, some with too many limbs, some who processed light instead of sound. Every one of them recognized fear. They had seen it in 1,000 species facing judgment. Kalen Voss did not have it, because Kalen Voss knew something the council had forgotten to ask. Why was Earth even here? 3 years earlier, humanity's arrival on the galactic stage had been an accident of bad timing. A survey drone had stumbled across a human deep space relay, and within months Earth found itself thrust into a bureaucracy 12,000 years in the making, forced to answer to committees that had never once considered that a species might arrive without any interest in being ruled. Humanity had smiled. Humanity had signed the treaties. Humanity had sat quietly in the back of assemblies while the council debated whether their species deserved provisional citizenship in a galactic order they'd never asked to join. And humanity had watched, learned, cataloged every rule, every protocol, every unspoken assumption baked into 11,000 years of council governance, including the one etched into the very foundation of the assembly hall. No blood shall be shed within these walls by council decree, on pain of the sundering clause. Nobody remembered why the clause existed. It predated every species currently seated in the chamber. It was ceremonial, archaic, the kind of rule everyone assumed was symbolic rather than literal. Vrenadaskal had just broken it. Twice. "You want to know why we developed weapons technology beyond the Ascension protocols?" Kalen asked, raising his voice now, letting it carry to every species in the gallery. "Because 3 months ago, a Threll patrol ship fired on a human colony ship in neutral space. 41 dead. Children among them. And when we brought evidence to this council, you tabled it. You tabled a massacre because the Threll delegation threatened to withdraw trade concessions." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The Vashti delegation, reptilian, ancient, deeply committed to procedural law, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "That's a fabrication," Vren snarled. "It's in the black box recovery data," Salara said, "which we would have submitted as evidence if this trial had followed a single one of its own procedures. We weren't given legal representation. We weren't given the right to call witnesses. We were dragged in here, and when I asked, politely, to see the charges in writing, your enforcer broke my jaw." She looked up at Vren with steady, furious eyes. On camera, the silence that followed was absolute. Because every session of the Grand Assembly was recorded, transmitted, and archived, broadcast in real time to every member world in the Council, a transparency measure instituted 9,000 years ago after a corruption scandal that had nearly torn the coalition apart. 400 species were watching this proceeding live. 400 species had just watched a council enforcer strike a shackled, kneeling representative of a member species in the most sacred chamber in the galaxy. "The Sundering Clause," said a new voice. Every head turned. Counselor Thessaly Orn of the Vashti Compact rose slowly from her seat, her ancient scaled face unreadable. She had sat on the council for over 2,000 years. She had never once, in all that time, invoked the clause everyone assumed was myth. "Explain it," Kalen said. "For the record, I think everyone should understand exactly what just happened." Thessaly's throat sac pulsed, a Vashti sign of deep discomfort. The Sundering Clause was written by the Founders' Coalition to guarantee this chamber as inviolable ground. It is the single provision that cannot be amended, suspended, or overridden by any vote, any emergency measure, any circumstance. Its purpose was to ensure that whatever disputes tore at the galaxy outside these walls, the Assembly itself would remain a place where even the most desperate, the most condemned, could not be harmed. It is the foundation the entire Council's legitimacy rests upon. And the penalty, Kalen said, for violating it? Thessaly's ancient eyes closed briefly. Any species whose representative sheds blood within the Assembly Hall by Council authority forfeits its seat, its treaties, and its standing before every other member world, permanently and without appeal. It is the only crime for which the punishment is automatic. It requires no vote. The Threll Dominion just lost its council membership, Kalen said. Live, in front of 400 worlds. Vren's 4 eyes went wide. "This is a manipulation, a trick. The human planned this." "I didn't plan getting my head split open by your guards," Kalen said. "I didn't plan Solara's jaw getting broken. You did that. All I did was make sure enough witnesses were watching when you did it. Because that was the truth of it. The truth the Council had never bothered to learn about humanity in 3 years of treating them as a curiosity to be managed rather than a civilization to be understood. Humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of surviving powerful institutions that didn't want them to survive. They knew how procedure could be a weapon. They knew how public witness could be armor. They knew that the moment an authority broke its own rules in front of everyone, it had already lost, even if it didn't realize it yet. Vren had walked into this chamber certain he held all the power. He hadn't understood that Kalen and Solara had walked in already certain of one thing. Cruelty performed in the light does not stay hidden. Thessaly turned to the gallery, her voice carrying the weight of 2,000 years of law. By the authority of the Founders' Coalition and witnessed by full assembly, the Threll Dominion's council seat is dissolved, effective immediately. All Threll representatives are to be escorted from these grounds. Chaos erupted across the chamber, delegates shouting, translators struggling to keep pace, the Threll delegation rising in furious protest that meant nothing now, because the clause required no vote, no debate, no mercy. Kalen felt the restraints finally release from his wrists as a Vashti guard, silent and grim, cut them free. Beside him, Solara was helped to her feet, her jaw already being tended by a med drone that had descended from the gallery. "You knew," she murmured to him, wincing. "You knew this whole time they'd have to hit us eventually. You just needed them angry enough to forget themselves." "I knew they saw us as animals," Kalen said, watching Vren being dragged, screaming, from the hall he had ruled for moments before. "I just needed the rest of the galaxy to see it too." Thessaly approached them, her ancient eyes studying the two humans with something that might have been respect, or might have been unease at having just witnessed exactly how dangerous quiet patience could be. "Your species is unlike anything this council has governed," she said. Kalen managed something close to a smile, blood still drying on his temple. "You haven't seen anything yet. You just handed humanity a seat at the table and a demonstration, in the same afternoon, that we know exactly how your own laws work better than you do." Behind them, the crystal walls of the Assembly Hall, stained for the first time in 11,000 years, caught the light, and every species watching understood, in that moment, that the balance of power in the galaxy had just quietly, irrevocably shifted.